metalheads of the internet, and welcome to a new episode of the Metal Meltdown. And today we're looking at a brand new studio album from the Acacia Strain entitled Slow Decay. I've always been consistently and constantly fascinated by the Acacia Strain. While many of their deathcore peers were busy reheating and recycling the same tired open-tab breakdowns over and over and over again, the Acacia Strain, meanwhile, has been constantly expanding sonically, pushing themselves into heavier, darker, more progressive territory, resulting in emotionally punishing and exhilarating records like Death is the Only Mortal, Grave Bloom, Coma Witch, the latter of whom I would honestly look to as perhaps one of the greatest deathcore albums ever made. To this day, I don't think any deathcore band has envisioned and executed something stronger, something more ambitious and more powerful than what the Acacia Strain did on Coma Witch. And yet, despite that album having come out in 2014, I can't help but feel as if it's in fact 2020 that is the band's true creative peak, as the band has been constantly releasing new material. Starting with their surprise album, It Comes in Waves, which showed the band going into much more hellish and psychological territory, and continuing with a series of EPs released over the last 6 months, all of which combined spell out the word Decay. Eventually all leading up to the release of this new studio album, Slow Decay, which arguably also acts as a compilation of the previous EPs. A truly genius promotional strategy, if I may say so, as this constant stream of new music has allowed the Acacia Strain to remain relevant and to remain trending over the course of 7 months, and even in spite of a global pandemic that has dominated the modern news cycle. Now, we have seen some bands in the past play around with a similar promotional strategy, namely Protest the Hero, who released every song from the Pacific Myth EP over the span of 6 months via a Bandcamp subscription service. But ultimately, and despite how much I love Protest the Hero and hold them near and dear to my heart, I think what the Acacia Strain have done here is a lot more exciting and a lot more ambitious. And not just because they've released objectively way more material in a similar span of time, but because they have also continued to expand as songwriters and musicians throughout this entire process. Obviously, the releases share sonic and thematic similarities, but none of them have been quite the same. And right away, this sets up Slow Decay to be as immediately punishing and as immediately, immediate as its predecessor, It Comes in Waves. Take, for instance, opening number Feed a Pigeon, Breed a Rat, which wastes absolutely no time in showing you exactly what kind of band the Acacia Strain is in 2020. Burly, abrasive, super in your face, with hellish, tortured vocals, and a lot of very eerie crescending grooves that feel like something pulled out of the Gojira playbook. Another good example, the track Solace and Serenity, a slow, churning, brooding mid-pace number with a lot of very eerie atmospheric guitar floating, dangling above the track, almost like a vulture waiting for a weak animal to drop dead so it can pick skin and meat off of its carcass. Or on the track Earth Will Become Death, which, somewhat true to its title, really does feel as if the weight of the world is crushing down upon you in hopes of killing you. I mean, the downbeats on this thing are just so heavy, with the band pummeling almost in unison over the span of 4 minutes, with these sludgy drawls in between and some ferocious vocals complementing all of it, making it feel all the more harrowing and making you feel all the more hopeless in turn. Granted, this isn't entirely out of the ordinary. The Acacia Strain is consistently a very dark and bleak band lyrically and conceptually, particularly on their last studio album, It Comes in Waves. But that album wasn't just dark and bleak, it was also very ethereal, very spiritual, and went out of its way to challenge your political and religious values. Whereas this, by comparison, is a lot more blunt, a lot more brutal, a lot more straight to the point, and in general a lot more bitter and mean-spirited, as if the Acacia Strain believe that the earth itself has already decayed to some extent. And while it obviously isn't intentional, I would like to point out that a lot of what this album is communicating emotionally and conceptually is made all the more poignant in a particularly turbulent time in which half the world is on fire and the other half is still in quarantine. As we, for lack of a better phrase, watch day by day as our society and the earth we used to know slowly but not quietly decay away. Now, this is not to say the record is perfect. There are some cosmetic issues with the record, and I will say that there is a genuine downside to the band's unorthodox release strategy for Slow Decay. Regarding the former point, a lot of the guest spots on this record are really underwhelming and don't really add anything musically or conceptually to the record. I was particularly disappointed in Courtney LaPlante's guest spot on the track 1000 Painful Strings. I've really been liking her stuff with Spirit Box lately, and I was really excited to see what she might contribute to this, but ultimately it's just some background vocals that are added mostly for atmospheric effect at the very end of the number. And regarding the latter point, because of this album's unorthodox release strategy in which nearly all of the album's material is released over a 6-month span, you're walking into this album already kind of knowing what it's going to sound like. Like, part of what made It Comes in Waves such a surprising record was the fact that it was literally a surprise. Nobody saw it coming. Slow Decay by default can't have that because you've already heard most of this material. In fact, the album Slow Decay only features 2 brand new songs that weren't featured on any of the previous EPs. There is arguably more brought to the table because you are now hearing it all in order, but nonetheless, there's very little you could get from this album that you couldn't get by simply listening to all of the EPs in order of their release. Don't get me wrong, I very much love and appreciate everything that went into the creation of this album and its vision, but a little bit more mystery could have gone a long way to making this feel even more unique, even more dynamic. I'm going to give this album a very enthusiastic 3.5 out of 5. Issues aside, it is nonetheless one of the Acacia Strain's most ambitious records, sonically, emotionally, conceptually, and again, even promotionally. And it's honestly just really exciting to see a band that's been around for almost 20 years in a genre that is, let's be honest, inherently somewhat repetitive and one-dimensional, so excited to continue to experiment, so excited to find new ways to create and share their music with the world. I've no doubt that longtime fans of the Acacia Strain will be elated with this record, warts and all. And I've no doubt that fans of the more modern deathcore scene will also be elated with this record, warts and all. Can I say the same for those who have been disenchanted by the band's most recent records? No, especially not since, again, you have heard most of this material before Slow Decay has come out, thanks to this album's unorthodox release strategy. But at the same time, the Acacia Strain have been around long enough that you should kinda know where you stand on them if you know who they are. And even if you do, honestly, still check this out, because I don't think there's any other deathcore band thinking this much outside of the box as the Acacia Strain. Slow Decay, 3.5 out of 5, a damn good record. And that is it for the Metal Meltdown. I'm not an expert, nor do I claim to be, so what do you think? Do you like this record? Do you not like this record? And what do you want to hear from me next? And thank you for watching. Make sure you press subscribe so you get updates on the Metal Meltdown fucking immediately, and you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.